Good morning, everyone. Tim Caldwell here with CTEMS. Looking forward to sharing with you some information that you shared with us last month during the Industry Direction Questionnaires. For this portion of the monthly webcast, we'll be going for about 45 minutes. I will be sharing with you slides containing the findings from our monthly Industry Direction Questionnaires. You have an opportunity to reach me using the chat panel in the right-hand portion of the GoToMeeting/Citrix screen. So certainly feel free to post any questions, comments, or other items as we go along. I will certainly try to answer any questions that you pose to me as we do go along, but if not, we've saved a couple of minutes at the end for Q&A. Additionally, please keep in mind that this information that we will be sharing on this webcast will also be made available to you in the form of the monthly newsletter. We've made a slight change in the scheduling of the newsletter, and that'll be going out next week on Tuesday as opposed to the first of the month. So from now moving forward, the newsletters will be posted approximately 1 week following the monthly webcast. Well, with that, let's get started here. I think we covered the welcome and introductions. I want to remind everyone what the mission of CTEMS is and what we're driving towards. Additionally, the 4 topics that we're going to be addressing today are adoption trends around global TEM and WEM, bring your own device, and personal liable mobile devices, international wireless roaming expense trends, and we'll also be touching on the topic of mobile device management. As a reminder, your CTEMS contacts are myself, Tim Caldwell, Richard Gordon, the Membership Director, whom I'm sure many of you have had conversations with in the past and will continue to in the future, and Tim Liable, the founder of CTEMS. Our board members are listed on the right. They actively participate in helping us drive the direction of CTEMS areas of exploration in hopes of achieving our mission, which is to legitimize and advance the fixed and mobile telecom management industry to the position of a leading business practice. Everybody's participation in the monthly Industry Direction Questionnaires, the feedback and interaction that we receive from you both personally and as well as through the LinkedIn group that we've established for you exclusively, all help in driving towards this mission. As a reminder, the Industry Direction Questionnaires on a monthly basis. You'll receive a questionnaire on the 15th of each month. Take a few moments with that to provide your feedback, input, and experiences. The goal is to baseline telecom management adoption trends, understand and identify services offered by industry suppliers, and then evaluate opportunities for improving telecom management value overall. From that, we can then develop telecom management standards that hopefully will be adopted across the industry and help us in achieving our mission of advancing the industry overall. Whoops. As a reminder, the scale that we're working from looks like this. When thinking about adoption of certain activities, certain telecom management tasks or other practices that are out there, we consider there to be full adoption when 75% or more of enterprises are currently performing these activities. In the 51 to 74% range, which is the mid-range there, we're leading towards adoption. And then we want to pay particular attention to the activities that are less than 50% adopted and evaluate them in a bit more detail. It could be that these are leading or activities that are leading towards adoption, or it could be that these are areas that just need more focus and more attention. So we utilize this scale to rationalize this thought of adoption in the industry overall. So with that, and keeping our agenda in mind, again, global TEM and WEM practices, bring your own device trends, international wireless roaming, expense trends, and mobile device management. First, we want to take a look at the suppliers that are CTEMS members and use this information to establish a baseline from which we can begin the discussion. So one of the things that we did back in February, last month, is capture information from the supplier members regarding their global services scope, independent of whether they were fixed fixed services or wireless services or carrier services or whatever they may be. We just wanted to understand where supplier members sit in terms of services that they provide. You'll see that North America, or the suppliers provide services in North America to the greatest degree. About 4 out of all 10 suppliers provide them in North America. South Central America was second. And then the area of the globe that is, I'll say, least served by supplier members today is the Middle East Africa region. So again, want to use this information just to set some expectations about some findings that we'll share with you in just a moment. Another area of exploration is independent of the service scope. We wanted to understand where suppliers have the greatest or the most and the least amount of experience in terms of providing telecom management goods and services to their clients. So first we're going to take a look at where the supplier members sit in terms of providing or having the most amount of experience. And again, North America, the greatest amount of experience collectively. Asia Pac comes in second at 10%. The areas in which current members have the most amount of experience, 2% of them say Europe, and then 2% in Middle East Africa, and South Central America in 8%. So again, this is supplier members where they have the most amount of experience collectively. Considering the fact that a large portion of the TEM and WEM suppliers in particular that are part of CTEMs, being based in North America, it certainly makes, certainly isn't too much of a leap to indicate that, yeah, North America is going to be the greatest amount of scope, but several of them do have quite a bit of experience in rest of world as well. Now, to contrast with the most amount of experience providing TEM and WEM services, we also want to take a look at where members have the least amount of experience. And again, the area of the globe that tends to be least served in terms of services being available and least experience is that Middle East Africa region. Europe at 6%, that's relatively low. About a quarter, just to take over 20% of the current supplier members say Asia Pacific is the area in which they have the least amount of experience. So again, these are expectation setting slides based upon what the current scope of services and experience set is for the supplier members. Now, I think this becomes a bit more relevant in thinking about what services are being provided across the globe by suppliers today. And I want to take a couple of moments with this. So if we start at the top, there's almost a near even split. I'll say 60% of all CTEM supplier members indicate that they provide technology supporting mobile. They also provide managed or professional services associated with wireless mobility management. So that's the area in which the greatest amount of service is being provided across the globe. Not too far behind that are the managed services or professional services and the technology for fixed or wireline services that fall under TEM. So if you take a look at the top 4 power bars there, collectively the supplier members provide technology and some level of managed or professional services for mobility and for fixed wireline telecom services. And this is the area in which they are most familiar and where their service offerings tend to sit. As we go down from that, there's a much smaller percentage overall, 41%, that provide full BPO outsourced services for mobile or full outsourced BPO services for wireline at 37 and 41% respectively. It's kind of interesting to note on this as you compare and contrast. If we go to the bottom and look at the second bar from the bottom under Global Wireless Help Desk Services, so I want to compare that up against the top line there. 18% of CTEM suppliers provide global wireless help desk services. Yet, they provide other managed services to a degree of 61% across the globe as it relates to wireless mobility management. That tends to indicate to me that quite a bit of the managed services that are being provided are likely associated with activities outside of help desk. Could be kitting and activation, invoice payment and processing, auditing, optimization, and a lot of those other activities where the workload can be offloaded from the client, the end enterprise client, off to the supplier. So one area that just collectively amongst this membership that appears to be a bit, I don't want to say underserved, I'll just say not served to a greater degree, is wireless help desk services. I also found it interesting that while members are providing global services in varying configurations, only 6% of the suppliers have internal staff or localized staff in each country and or region of the world to support that particular area. This is a phenomenon that we've seen over and over again for many years, and this is not to say that services can't be provided if you don't have somebody local. There's likely a high degree of partnership with other companies and other business arrangements that are made. But I think in terms of just using this as its own little CTEMS as its own little ecosystem to take a look at the global state of TEM and wireless mobility management, I think we have a pretty good footprint here illustrating what's available in the market, where and how suppliers offer these services, and what varying configurations exist. So while we're taking a look just at CTEM's membership, I'll say that this tracks very closely up against other information that we've seen in the past. So I think this is a pretty good template. Now, in thinking about perception and perspectives, we asked the suppliers that are providing global services to indicate, to put themselves in the shoes of the enterprises and tell us what they believed enterprises were thinking in terms of the most critical drivers for enterprises globalizing their TEM program. And this is very interesting because spend visibility and business intelligence and telecom cost savings were both neck and neck there. Process and efficiency control to about a 1 out of 2 degree, 50%. And then it was interesting that that this thought of full outsourcing, you know, the catalyst from an enterprise perspective being to reduce headcount, or there's an outsourcing mandate to say, hey, get somebody else to provide these services for us. That was a much lesser degree. So again, this is the supplier perspective relative to the question of why do enterprises, or what are the most critical drivers for enterprises, I should say, for migrating to a global TEM web program. So we're going to flash back to this slide in a bit as we take a look at what enterprises really told us were the motivations and the critical drivers for their globalization initiatives. Switching gears slightly, one of the things that we wanted to understand from a supplier perspective is, do they have mobility offerings that support employee liable or employee-owned devices? And in fact, nearly 70% of the suppliers that provide wireless services say, yes, this is in our wheelhouse. We can support employee liable devices. We also wanted to take a look at mobile device management offerings specifically. Now, in this particular slice, and as it relates to mobility or mobile device management, 58% of the suppliers that offer mobile services and or goods do have MDM capabilities in their offering suite. Large portion of them have partnered with MDM companies to create a unified solution. I found it a bit interesting that 58% say, yes, we have an MDM capability, whether it's their own homegrown capability or whether it's one through a partnered MDM or through an MDM partnership, I should say. Yet, I'm going to go back here for a second. Nearly, well, I guess it was 11% more say they offer employee liable devices. What I take from that is that from an employee liable device support perspective, this is likely related to a large degree to supporting the cost allocations, perhaps chargebacks or stipending for the enterprises, not necessarily or exclusively support of security up against the device. And I take that from this simply from the fact that if MDM capabilities are not present, there probably isn't any other support or likely isn't any other support related to security. But nonetheless, the suppliers are very well suited in the market space to be able to support many different elements of employee liable support as well as MDM as we think about it. Now, one of the things that I mentioned a bit ago was that the suppliers often, very frequently, partner with third-party MDM companies to create that mobile device management offering. So we were interested specifically in understanding who they partner with. Now, keep in mind that the suppliers that are listed here, the MDM suppliers that are listed here, come in a couple of different forms and fashions, and they serve different markets and different capabilities. But it was very clear that, at least from a CTEM's membership perspective, AirWatch is the most common MDM supplier that is partnered with, Zenprise, Mobile Iron, and Boxstone, as well as MOS 360. Goods, while it has mobile device management capabilities, it's often more, there are other capability suites within Good Technologies that I'll say expand MDM offerings. So that's a little bit of an outlier here, although Good does support MDM. So just thought that would be kind of interesting because there are, depending upon how you count it, upwards of about 50 different MDM providers that provide either installed technology or cloud-based or SaaS-based implementation. So wanted to just get a sample there of who the suppliers are working with and see how that relates up against the enterprises. Now, we're going to do a callback to something I shared with you a few moments ago. We asked, again, the suppliers about their perspective regarding the question, what are enterprises' most critical drivers for globalizing TEMP? So we wanted to take a look and do a compare and contrast here. I think there's a good deal of alignment on the driver of telecom cost savings. Enterprises, to a degree of 77%, say that's the most critical driver. Suppliers, rather, indicate 71%. We're also relatively close on the reduced headcount or outsourcing mandate, although enterprises, to a greater degree, indicate that that's a driver in their environment. What's kind of interesting is the middle two, the process efficiency and control. Enterprises, to a greater degree, indicate that that's a prime driver than the suppliers do. And then the inverse is true on spend visibility and business intelligence. One thing, and I'll let the cat out of the bag here a bit and share with you that the spend visibility and business intelligence becomes a very interesting phenomenon when we start talking to enterprises about what the benefits realized are. So keep that in mind, and I'll do a call back to that in a moment. So what we're seeing here is that from a supplier perspective, you know, why do enterprises, or what do enterprises consider to be the most critical drivers? Again, they're thinking spend visibility and business intelligence with cost savings to a slightly lesser degree. Enterprises are saying telecom cost savings and process efficiency and control is their one, too. So now let's take a look at the enterprises and see if we can establish a good baseline here for these four topics of globalization, bring your own device, mobile device management, and international roaming expense. So first I wanted to set a baseline for understanding where enterprise members, organizations, where their companies and enterprises sit relative to the globe. So 100% of enterprise members have a presence in North America, an additional 36% in APAC, 36% in Europe, about a little less than a third in South Central America, and then Middle East, Africa at 20% or 21%. So again, this is a baseline setting just to understand what the membership, what the enterprise memberships, collective organizations look like, where they have a global presence, where they have facilities, where they have employees. Now, in thinking about global TEM and WEM programs, or just, I should say not global at this point, but just thinking about TEM and WEM programs, we also wanted to understand across the geographic footprint of their organizations, where do they have an established TEM or WEM program of any kind? So 61% indicate that they have a North American only presence. And then as we get to other regions of the world, the numbers got really, really small. So what we're looking at here is, in that second bar, 16% of enterprises have a TEM and WEM program that covers all 5 regions of the world. 7% have a TEM WEM program that covers North America plus Europe. And then 5% North America plus Asia Pacific. And then, of course, 61% say no, it's North America only. So what we're looking at here, and I don't think this is atypical up against what I would have expected, but what we're looking at here is that the presence of TEM WEM programs in North America tend to be much higher than when you start getting into other parts of the world. And there are many different drivers for that. We'll explore that in a little bit. So then we wanted to understand, independent of what part of the world their TEM WEM program exists, just to break it out, a little bit differently. Enterprise members, do you consider having a global TEM program? 63% said yes, 6% didn't know. Excuse me, I'm saying these backwards. 31% said yes, they have a global program, they consider to have a global program, multiple parts of the world. 63% said no, and then 6% were unsure. And we wanted to test and understand if there was a difference in the type of service being supported by the telecom management program, whether it leaned more towards mobile only or fixed only. We just wanted to understand what this looks like. So of that 31% that said, yes, I have a global program, 72% indicated that, in fact, it covers all telecom services. And then there was an even split here of organizations that indicated no, it was only wireless or it was only wireline. So what we can extrapolate from this is that the majority of enterprise organizations with a global TEM program, they consider themselves to have a global TEM program covering more than one region of the world, tend to have fixed and mobile as part of the configuration or part of the service management scope. So then, in thinking again about having a global program, and again, this is enterprises being asked the question, do you have a global program that covers more than, I'll say your local country? We want to understand what was included in that program as it relates back to the TEM and WEM suppliers. And this, I have to admit, was a bit surprising. What we discovered here is that nearly 1 out of 3 indicate that they have a supplier's technology, yet they're managing telecom internally. They're not using managed services or professional services from their supplier. They have not outsourced it in a BPO type configuration, yet it's just I shouldn't say just, it is a technology that simply supports the TEM WEM program and its internal staff platoon to get the job done. To a slightly lesser degree, 1 out of 5 there will say they engage in managed services or they engage with their supplier for managed or professional services, handling some element of the 16 core activities of TEM and WEM. And then only 9% indicate, yeah, we use a supplier technology, we use their support, it's our own staff platoon to get the job done, and it's a combination of all of the above. And this is a bit of a paradox, I think, at least based on previous experiences, in the sense that often when enterprises, particularly North American enterprises, when they globalize their TEM and WEM programs, what they often seek and want is I'll say the expertise of their supplier in other parts of the world. Now, what we may be seeing here is that certainly that expertise has been utilized for, I'll say, the onboarding or the implementation or the deployment. Yet after that happens, the company then typically just runs on with managing it with their own internal staff. So I think that this certainly warrants a bit more exploration. But what we're seeing today is that the most dominant model of globalizing TEM or WEM program is for an enterprise to have people platooned to do the job wherever they may be, internal staff that is, and then utilization of a supplier technology for ongoing management. So then something else that had kind of, I'll say, had occurred to us as we went along here, and that is that oftentimes when enterprises globalize a program, they'll stage it, and if it's a North American-centric company, they may start in North America, and then they may hit Europe and Asia Pac, and whatever the progression is. So there may be a thought of a multi-year rollout, either different regions of the world and or different countries based upon their particular circumstances. So for organizations that have a global program, meaning I'll say their native country plus at least one more, and when asking them the question, do you plan to expand further? Do you plan to continue your globalization? 66% said no. Now, I'll indicate that a large portion of those that said no primarily were doing so because they did not have anywhere else to expand to. 18% said yes, and 16% were unsure. Bear with me 1 second. I realize the screen sharing stopped for a moment. I think we should be back online in 1 second. All right. So again, in thinking about this idea of is an organization finished globalizing? Do they have more to go? About 1 in 5 said, yeah, we have more to go. I'm skipping forward here. Bear with me. There we go. So 18% said yes. Now, you recall a bit earlier, I said I was going to do a call back to the slide that indicated that there was a difference in, or a potential difference in perception about what the critical factors are for globalizing your TEM program. And there's a real interesting phenomenon that happens here. And I would posit that this is potentially one of the most interesting findings about globalization. We ask for those organizations that are going to globalize further or go into other countries what their critical need was that was going to be satisfied and why they wanted to continue expansion. And one of the things that you'll notice here, I want to draw your attention to the third line down, spend visibility and business intelligence. When an enterprise is initially deploying their global TEM-WEM program, about 1 out of every 2, 51%, indicate that spend visibility and business intelligence is a critical driver. It falls as third on the list of the 4 that are up there. Yet, after they have globalized to at least one other country, when asked if they are going to continue globalization or they have more to do, that quickly becomes the #1 critical driver for their additional expansion. So 51% jumps right up to 86% after the first, I'll say the first phase, if you will, of globalization. Cost savings is still high. Process efficiency and control is still high. The reduced headcount outsourcing goes down a couple of ticks, so 14%. And what we take from this is based upon what an organization believes is an element of the business case to globalize initially. When they take that to be spend visibility and business intelligence, after they have globalized, they realize the value of what spend visibility and business intelligence can mean to their organization, and it quickly catapults up to being the #1 driver for continued globalization or moving on into additional phases. So I think what we're seeing here is a series of cause and effect issues whereby an organization is realizing the benefits. They're not, I'll say, hypothesizing what the benefits will be. They've already realized them through partial globalization, and they need more of that. Now, what I found really interesting about this is, you may recall that suppliers, when asked about their perspectives, indicated that spend visibility and business intelligence was the #1 driver. And so I think what we're seeing here is this convergence of suppliers that have helped enterprises go through the process of globalization. They have a firm understanding of what the benefits will be up against these 4. Then all of a sudden what happens is, as organizations go through and experience what the benefit is, it's realized to a greater degree. All right. So now we want to take a look at some of the bring your own device elements. And I'll give you some background on a trend that AOTMP has been tracking here up against this information. As of today, organizations on average, 26% of the wireless devices they have platooned in the field are employee liable, 74% are corporate liable. Over the past 3 or 4 years, there's been about a 5% swap out between corporate liable and employee liable. So about 3 years ago, corporate liable was about 85% and employee liable about 15%. A couple of years ago, it went down to about 80-20, and now we start to see this shift. So I think what we're really seeing here is over time, certainly these are going to level out at some point, but the continued growth area is employees with their own device, a personal device, versus the corporate device. Keeping in mind that this is all enterprises in aggregate, and your particular circumstance may be heavily weighed one way or the other, but this is just an industry average. So we see more trending towards the corporate, or excuse me, the employee liable / bring your own device phenomenon. We also wanted to understand across all enterprises what percentage of the enterprise users, corporate liable now, are international travelers. And of course, there was a lot of different information. I'll direct your attention to the bottom. When we take everybody in aggregate, 1 out of every 10 are going to have some amount of international travel. But what we found was, across all enterprises, the most common and the most frequent response is between 1 and 5% are going to have some amount of international travel. I think what we're seeing here is the circumstance where there are many organizations where they keep the international travelers on a corporate liable program. They deem that to be the best for managing their expenses associated with that, as opposed to going to a stipend or some other configuration. And so about 1/3 of all companies say that 1 to 5% of their employees are going to have international travel. And then about 13% of companies say none. So that's kind of a new look at answering the question, how many might sustain some international charges or need an international plan? To that end, and there's a lot of pretty bars on this chart, but I want to draw your attention to 2 things. The monthly average plan cost, voice and data, for international travelers is $113 a month. This is what's attributed to the international expenses. The reason we included the bar charts at the bottom, the different variations, is I wanted to show the distribution across different companies of what the expenses might be. And you'll notice that, you know, in taking a look at all enterprise members, 18% are in that $80 to $100 or $81 to $100 range. 12% are in that $12 to $150 range. But you'll also notice as we go north on the scale, or to the right there, that there are quite a few organizations that are getting into that, 150 to 200, greater than 300, so on and so forth. So I think that in just making the statement that the average is $113 a month, I feel pretty comfortable with that up against the information that everybody has shared with us. But I wanted to utilize this to illustrate that while that's an average, there are lots of different experiences relative to different organizations and what those plan costs might be for individual users. So now you might ask the question, Tim, if this is voice and data, what percentage of that $113 on average is attributed to voice and what percentage is attributed to data? And I hate to tell you this is going to be a bit anticlimactic. It was an even split, 50-50 right down the middle. So probably could have guessed that. I think what this does indicate, though, and what was kind of interesting, is I had fully expected as we went into this that data would be much higher than voice, simply from the fact that we've all heard or been involved in the experiences whereby, somebody decides that, when they're traveling in Luxembourg, that's the perfect time to download the Star Wars trilogy onto their wireless device. And so, the multi-$1,000 bills and so on and so forth. But I think that those are anomalies, and certainly they're painful. But all in all, a penny goes to voice, a penny goes to data when thinking about international travel on average. So then we wanted to understand how enterprises are currently handling international travelers in terms of the dollars and pennies and what the different configurations are. The most common configuration to the tune of 4 out of 5 is that voice and data plans are purely corporate liable. They're paid on a corporate device, and there's probably little, if any, interaction from the user in that configuration. There are, to a lesser degree, 13, 14% that have the T&E plan. The user submits an expense report for those elements. And then when thinking about, we combined a couple of things together here because they were spot on close. And that is that either having a stipend, saying you're allotted X amount of dollars for international travel, either for voice or data, or capping it, indicating you'll be allotted $50 a month, or whatever the answer is. That was a much more or much less frequent activity. 5% for data being capped and or a stipend being allocated, and 12% for voice. So moving on with that, we had explored some information about MDM being a part of the offering suite for suppliers. Wanted to take a look and understand how enterprises have adopted MDM software. So about a third, 29%, indicate that yes, they have MDM software in their organization. In thinking about who the companies are, they were very much the same companies that the suppliers have partnered with. There were a couple of other mentions of other different MDM type companies, but about 1 in 3 enterprises do currently have MDM deployed. There's a smaller group that didn't know, and then 60% indicated no, they don't have MDM software. So I think with that, we've covered off on several different elements of what's going on in the industry, both from a supplier perspective and from an enterprise perspective. I think that there were some very interesting trends that we can certainly work off of here to understand more about globalization, the effects of international travelers and wireless and how that's being managed today and what those common configurations are, as well as the presence and prevalence of MDM software as part of the solution suite for managing not only corporate liable devices, but also perhaps the employee liable and BYD devices. BYOD, excuse me. So with that, a couple of quick reminders. The next industry direction questionnaires are going to launch on 15th, which I believe is day after tomorrow. So those will be open for 10 days. Certainly we appreciate everybody's participation that enables us to generate these findings and share with you what's going on in the industry and provide some perspective and direction as to where we should go next collectively as an industry. If you have not currently connected to the CTEM's LinkedIn group, certainly please go out there and feel free to send in an invite. This is a members-only group exclusively for active CTEM's members. This allows us to share information and collaborate amongst each other. As I mentioned before, the next CTEM's newsletter will be next Tuesday, which is March 20th. We'll be publishing those a week following the monthly member webcast each month moving forward. And then we look forward to seeing you again online on April 10th, which is our next member webcast, in which we'll share the response information from the industry direction questionnaires happening this week. If anybody has any questions, we've got a couple of extra moments. Certainly feel free to post them on the chat, and I'll be more than happy to respond if I can. If you have any follow-on questions, certainly you can reach me or reach out to Richard Gordon. He'll be more than happy to assist you. Keep an eye out in your email next week for the monthly newsletter that will, again, share and recap all the information that we've shared with you today. So we'll stay on the line for a couple of moments. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to post them in the chat.